Yo everyone, welcome to my predictions and breakdown of the entire UFC Fight Night Kape vs Almabayev fight card. This card has a lot of relatively close fights on it in my opinion. Hard to pick, fights that could go either way, but I've done my best here to cook up some picks that I think will be pretty solid and a little unconventional. So watch the whole video to see how many underdogs I've picked. But before we get into this video, let's go back and talk a little bit about the last fight card, which was UFC Seattle Cejudo vs Song. We did very well on that last card. We got almost every single confident pick correct, and we did well on bets overall as well. If you would like to see what my bets for that card were and my overall thoughts and recap of the event, the video is up on my channel, and I'll leave a link on this video to my recap video so you guys can check it out. As always, I'll be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event. Timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you'd like to skip to any fight in particular. We're going to start with the first fight of the card, which is Montana De La Rosa versus Luana Carolina. Now, okay guys, I've spent more time looking at this fight than I probably needed to, and I guarantee that I spent more time thinking about this fight than anyone else predicting this fight right now. This is not to brag or anything. If anything, I'm a little sad that I was sifting through these fights for that long in my opinion, but in my brutally honest opinion, both these girls struggle a lot in their fights in certain moments, and they both have blatant deficiencies and weaknesses in parts of their game to where I can say that they will not be getting close to the belt or anywhere inside the rankings or top 10 of their division. Luana Carolina is the slight favorite. Odds are close to pick'em odds though, and she will be the more active striker in this matchup in my opinion. She's got some solid takedown defense and can be pretty tricky on the feet because she doesn't have the most conventional style of striking. Her main game plan will be to keep this one standing and try to win a decision by being the fighter doing more damage and landing more shots. Montana De La Rosa has more avenues to win this fight in my opinion. She will try to shoot some takedowns here since she is a grappler first. She's not afraid to clinch against the fence to work her way into some better positions, to throw her knees and to look for the takedowns. She's always looking for submissions. I usually see her trying to snatch something up when the moment presents itself. Her striking isn't terrible, but she does take a lot of damage to give back her own strikes at times and can definitely work on her defense as she's closing the distance. I don't know about you guys, but I am staying away from this fight in regards to betting on it. I could always put a fight like this in a parlay as an over 2.5 rounds or to go the distance type bet. I think that's relatively safe. Could see a submission, but I don't really see them knocking out one another. I'm actually going to go with the unconventional pick here and go Montana De La Rosa. I think although her striking isn't the best, it has improved somewhat, and she can be quite tricky herself with some up elbows, spinning back fists, knees in the clinch, those sorts of things. I think she keeps a decent output. She can do well enough on the feet to where if she does get the takedown, it will pretty much secure the round for her, because I'm not sure Luana Carolina's ability to get up from bottom position is as good as her initial takedown defense. I could see this going to Luana, of course, just by stuffing the takedowns and landing the better output and the better shots in general, but might as well pick an underdog when you can. You know, am I right, guys? Let's give it a go. Montana De La Rosa is the pick as the underdog. Moving on to Charles Johnson versus Ramazan Temirov. And I know this is the prelim opener and the first fight of the card originally. Now it's the second fight of the card, but this fight might be the one I am most excited for apart from the actual main event itself. So I actually have put a lot of thought into this matchup and the breakdown. I know it sounds crazy, but these guys are extremely exciting, and according to the odds, as of the time of recording this video, it's pretty much a pick'em fight with Charles Johnson being the slight underdog, and I do agree with that. I think this fight could go either way. Both fights definitely have a clear avenue for victory in this one. Charles Johnson, ranked number 12 at flyweight, currently on a 4-fight winning streak, knocking out the number 15 in ranked Joshua Van around last year, and then most recently beat Sumadaji by decision at the end of last year as well. Very impressive fighter, incredible footwork, insane cardio, great striking output, and overall just a great striker and an overall funny dude and a fun-loving dude inside the octagon to watch. He's had 6 losses in the UFC, but all of them, I believe, have been to strong wrestlers and grapplers in the division. No one so far has been able to knock him out or even purely outstrike him in his entire career to get the win over him, which is something that isn't said enough and needs to be mentioned. If we look at his opponent, Ramazan Temirov, 18-2 prospect on the rise in the flyweight division, and might also be one of the hardest hitters currently in the flyweight division, aside from maybe Kai Kara France. Insane power, insane finishing ability, extremely fast starter, likes to always hunt for that first round KO, and does seem to get it quite consistently. He's currently on a 10-fight win streak, and similar to Charles Johnson, the guy has never lost by KO, and his only losses have been to grapplers or wrestlers. So very similar stats when you compare the two in that regard for sure. And I honestly think that these guys have two major ways to win this one, and I might be in the minority opinion here, but I do think that Charles Johnson's main way to win this one would be to keep his usual fighting style, cardio, striking, high output style, but be more focused on the defense in the first round especially. He can then start to take over the fight from the second round onwards, being able to do more damage and land more strikes in the way of significant strikes to get either a late rounds TKO or decision win, a decision being the more likely of the two to happen. Ramazan Temirov's main way to win this fight is to knock out Charles Johnson in the very first round. Besides that, he might be able to squeeze out more damage than Johnson in the first and second round potentially, but would need to survive the third to win a decision if it were to go to decision. I think a KO for Temirov is way more likely than a decision win for him. And this is a tough pick, don't get me wrong. And if you do watch Charles Johnson's fights, the fact does remain that he hasn't lost by knockout in his career, but he does rely on his chin sometimes in bad situations, and he has taken some solid shots in fights. Like in his fight with Joshua Van, he took a lot of hard shots from Van in that fight, and against a harder puncher like Temirov, he might not be able to take those shots, and he might get badly hurt by some of those shots. But I can't stop thinking about if Charles Johnson does well in that first round and survives the heavy punches, pace, and pressure of Temirov. With the fight tape I've watched of Temirov, he does slow down drastically. Like, I mean extremely drastically slows down straight away into the second. He's still dangerous, but it's a massive decline in output, which would lower his chances of a KO insanely. He could show an improved gas tank in this one, but I don't really know, guys. From what I'm seeing, and I've watched a lot of his fights from when they do go to decision, I think I will be siding with the underdog in Charles Johnson to get this one done, and I do think he's good enough to survive that pressure in the first round and use his cardio and high output to win this fight by decision or later rounds TKO. But like I said, wouldn't be surprised to see Temirov win by KO, especially in the first round either. So slight underdog. Charles Johnson is the pick here. Close one though. Moving on to Andrea Lee versus JJ Aldrich. This is another fight, guys, that I wouldn't really find myself betting on anyone in particular. I might end up throwing something on the two WMMA fights on this card to go the distance in a 2-bet parlay. If you want any insight on my bets, guys, I usually end up doing that with WMMA fights that I think will go the distance, because on average, if you want to know a little bit of statistics here, WMMA fights in the flyweight division, according to the stats, go to decision a whopping 63.5% of the time, meaning that if you bet on 2 UFC WMMA fights to go the distance, the likelihood of you hitting those odds on average in a row is 40%. So 40% of the time, you cash the WMMA double parlay every single card, if I am correct. If I'm not just talking out of my behind and the math is right. If there is someone in the comments listening to this right now and can prove me right or wrong, please do, because that has been my go-to line of thinking for a little bit now. So you'll really get the chance to make me feel like an absolute genius or an absolute idiot big time. These percentages are also not taking into account how every fight and fighter is different and their individual finishing ability. It's just the average result of WMMA flyweight bouts in general. Anyways, if we get back to the fight, I think this is a pretty hard one to pick in general, but with Andrea Lee being on a 5-fight loss streak and being the older fighter at 36 years of age, it isn't looking very good for her at this point in her career. JJ Aldrich also coming off a loss to Veronica Hardy, where she was getting pieced up in the stand-up, but was able to make things close with her clinching and grappling pressure. I'll be honest with you guys here, I think I'm just going to pick JJ Aldrich, who is a slight favorite in this matchup, and it's mainly because I think she has quite a bit of heart. She finds a way to win some of her fights that have been pretty competitive, and I respect that a lot, and she does have a bit of pop in her shots when she commits to them, which I do like in a WMMA fighter. I also think she can have a bit of success applying pressure with her clinching, and will have the advantage on the ground as well. To pick Andrea Lee off 5 losses in a row, I just can't. That's me personally. If she wins this one convincingly, I think I'll start to look at her game a bit more carefully, but it will be based off of this performance. JJ Aldrich is the pick here, but remember guys, potential going to the decision parlay bet for WMMA fights on this card. Moving on to Danny Silva versus Lucas Almeida. Great fight and great matchup here for sure. Dangerous fight for both guys because both guys have some solid power, and if they manage to land hard on one another, I think there is a high chance we see a KO finish here, in my opinion. I could see it for both guys, but I think Lucas Almeida has the higher chance of catching Danny Silva in this fight, especially in the first round with the type of fighter Danny Silva is and the way he likes to apply pressure. Danny Silva is a solid striker with pretty solid power. He throws a lot of volume, but does tend to get hit a lot as well, which is a major detriment for him. He has some solid grappling skills to back up his striking. He has a great way of getting behind his opponents as well, and he has a good way of getting that body lock. So look out for him to use his grappling in this matchup. Lucas Almeida is a pretty technical, powerful, and well-rounded striker, but he can be controlled by strong grapplers in his fights, just like in his fight with Pat Sabatini. If Danny Silva is smart here, and he wants to win this fight the easy way, he will strike carefully when entering range, but mainly use his strikes to set up the takedown. Grappling Almeida, in my opinion, will make this fight way easier than trying to put him away on the feet. It can be done, it's just harder in my opinion. I'm going to pick Danny Silva because of that grappling in his back pocket, but this is still a dangerous fight for him. I do, however, think that Lucas Almeida is a pretty solid underdog, so look at that if you guys are looking for solid underdogs to bet on. He is the more technical striker, and that lack of head movement on Danny Silva and his overall striking defense makes the odds closer in my opinion. Moving on to Douglas Silva de Andrade versus John Castaneda. We've hit potentially another candidate for a fight that will go the distance. I need to go check what the odds are on over 2.5 rounds or going the distance on this fight because I do think it's highly likely. Both these guys are solid fighters, they have nice striking, and they're really tough to put away cleanly. But why John Castaneda is a moderate favorite on this fight, I have no idea. I think he should be a favorite, but I also do think this fight should be closer to even money with him being a slight favorite. Douglas Silva de Andrade is a predominant striker who loves a firefight. He's not afraid to brawl at all. He has some solid takedown defense. He usually likes to keep the fight standing. He lands some really solid shots in the pocket. He does tend to wind up a bit more than what I'd like, but it does make his opponents wary since one shot can change the way the fight goes. John Castaneda is a solid striker himself, but can and will mix up the grappling with his striking. He tends to fight on the front foot, meaning that he likes to be the one to close the distance and apply pressure, but he isn't completely reckless when he does this. He can be hit, which is a worry against someone like Andrade, but similar to Andrade, he also has a solid chin, which helps him get out of some rough situations, especially when the fight gets a little brawly. I do think this fight goes the distance. Like I said at the start, if I had to favor one person though, I could see this being a super close fight with John Castaneda edging out a very close decision victory over Andrade, maybe a close enough to be a split decision. That's my call for this fight. I am going to pick John Castaneda to win this one. And we're moving on to Ricardo Ramos versus Chepe Mariscal. This will be the first fight that gets someone in the Confident Picks list edition in Chepe Mariscal. First on the list, and for good reason. Both he and Ricardo Ramos have an identical record of 17 wins and 6 losses right now, but vastly different results. Chepe Mariscal has won his last 5 fights, being able to pretty notably beat some great names like Jack Jenkins, Trevor Peake, Morgan Charrier, and Damon Jackson, just to name his most recent 4 fights. And I think that win over Charrier might be his most impressive as well. Although it was a split decision and an arguable win, it was a win nonetheless against a very dangerous and talented prospect in the division. Ricardo Ramos, on the other hand, has lost 3 of his last 5, losing by guillotine finish twice in a row, firstly to Charles Jourdain and then to Julian Rosa. He's coming off a split decision win in a very close fight with Josh Kulabau, which I personally thought he might have lost that one, but it was close. Chepe Mariscal in this matchup will have the stronger pace of the two. He's going to have the more immense pressure. He'll be the more durable of the two fighters. Probably equal in stand-up ability, but he will be the stronger fighter overall, stronger wrestler, stronger grappler in my opinion. It's really hard to see him losing unless it's to a random submission or random KO. I don't see Ricardo Ramos being able to win a decision just because I think he'll get out-cardioed and outpaced with the stand-up and just the pressure of Chepe Mariscal. Picking Chepe Mariscal to get this one done potentially might put something on him to win by KO or decision. Pretty confident in him. That's why he's in the confident picks list, guys. Moving on to Austen Lane versus Mario Pinto. UFC veteran in Austen Lane taking on UFC debuter in Mario Pinto. I usually hate picking UFC debuters to win, and I tend to favor veterans of the UFC since they have more experience at the highest level, but I might have to make an exception for Mario Pinto. The guy is a solid striker, but he isn't your usual heavyweight power puncher. He's not to say he doesn't hit hard, because he most certainly does, but he relies more on outskilling his opponents, finding an opening to get the KO after breaking them down at range with his jab and his kicks to the legs, kicks to the body. This is a bad matchup for Austen Lane, since he usually likes to fight from the outside, which I think won't work for him since they're roughly the same size. And they're roughly the same reach as well. It will go down to who is more skilled in the stand-up dictating the shots, and that is Mario Pinto without a doubt. I also have seen Austen Lane be able to switch over to his grappling side and out-grapple some of his opponents that have been dangerous on the feet. So expect him to try his grappling in this fight if he's having a rough time on the feet. But the unfortunate thing is, from what I've been reviewing Mario Pinto's regional fight tape for, is that he actually has some pretty solid takedown defense, and that's not all. The guy actually has a great ability to get back up off the ground if the takedown is secured, meaning he can get up off bottom position and can work his way back up to his feet safely. Those types of skills make this fight relatively easy to pick. I don't know if Mario Pinto will get the KO here in this fight, but I do see him winning this fight by KO or decision. Most likely will be putting a bet on that. Austen Lane is a little too predictable at times and can lack setups for his shots and takedowns, and I can see Mario Pinto being able to capitalize on that. Mario Pinto is the pick. Moving on to the main card, Danny Barlow versus Sam Patterson. You guys will notice something a little different about this main card compared to the prelims, and it's that these picks are going to be a little bit quicker, because I feel like some of these fights are going to be a bit more one-sided in the main card, honestly, and one of them is the fight in Danny Barlow versus Sam Patterson. Sam Patterson is a solid striker who relies a lot on his range, his distance, size, overall his stature, and his reach advantage to keep fighters on the outside and do some solid work. He's got a solid ground game as well and does shoot some takedowns, but recently he hasn't needed to shoot since his opponents have been initiating the takedowns on him, and he's been able to get back-to-back submission wins like that. Very well-rounded fighter overall. Danny Barlow, on the other hand, though, is very dangerous as a striker, and he's not only powerful, but he's very technical from the outside. He moves very well, he's very quick, he's extremely fluid with the way he throws his punches. He doesn't have much of a ground game, but he has fantastic takedown defense, and most likely will not be taken down in this fight. I see this being a solely stand-up fight, because unlike Sam Patterson's past two opponents, Danny Barlow will not and should not initiate the grappling at all with him in this fight to even give him a chance of getting a submission. I think Danny Barlow pretty easily manages to outpoint, outdamage, and just flat out beat Sam Patterson in this fight in the striking, and I could see him honestly getting a KO in this fight as well, maybe in the first 2 rounds. So I will be putting a bet on that KO or decision bet on Danny Barlow in this fight, but I do need to check the odds first. Might make it a parlay or not, we'll see. Sam Patterson just looks a little too stiff for me, in my opinion. He's a little too rigid in his striking. It reminds me a little of like a Kevin Jusay, except Patterson is a little more awkward and a little slower, and he did get caught and knocked out not long ago in his debut by Yanal Ashmuz as well, and I believe he had an incredible reach advantage in that fight and couldn't keep the distance with Ashmuz's blitzes. Confident picks list for Danny Barlow, KO or decision bet most likely. Moving on to Hyder Amil versus William Gomis. Absolute banger of a matchup. Hyder Amil, 10-0, undefeated as a pro, is the type of fighter that loves to pressure super hard and close the distance, swinging hard shots to try to hurt his opponents badly. He's a little reckless. If you've watched his fight with Jong Young Lee, you know what I'm talking about, but he is durable, and he does have a solid chin on him with decent defense. He's got some decent grappling and clinching as well, but this will most likely be a stand-up fight, plain as day, going into this one. I think the best strategy for Hyder Amil in this fight would be to try to smother William Gomis and don't let him keep his distance and range. William Gomis will be the more technical fighter and likes to fight at range. He also likes to fight at his pace, so he will try to slow the fight down, slow down the pressure of an opponent like Hyder Amil early, and look to work and do damage to the legs and body so that he can start to take over in the second and third rounds. He's on a great win streak himself, most recently beating Joanderson Brito, which is a fantastic win on paper against a very tough opponent, but it was an arguable robbery win in my opinion, but close fight nonetheless. William Gomis will be the better all-round fighter everywhere, especially technically in the striking, but he needs to be wary of Hyder Amil making this fight relatively dirty by pressuring him heavy, and that's where this can get dangerous for him. I really do think William Gomis will be able to implement his game plan, since his movement, his speed, his timing from a distance is always quite solid, and the guy hasn't been knocked out in his whole career, since he does have quite solid defense striking fundamentals ingrained in him. It'll be hard for Hyder Amil to catch him in this fight, but not impossible. William Gomis is the pick. I will be putting him in my confident picks list because he should be getting this one done quite often by decision. Moving on, Nasrat Haqparast versus Esteban Ribovics. Man, this fight, I see a lot of people actually picking the underdog in Nasrat Haqparast, and I'm never going to say a fighter can't win, because anything can happen in a fight, but I just feel like they are overestimating Nasrat Haqparast a bit and underestimating Esteban Ribovics at this point. Nasrat Haqparast is coming off a split decision win versus Jared Gordon, and even the commentators were saying in that fight, Nasrat Haqparast, look at this guy, he looks great, his striking's improved. The guy didn't even outstrike and beat Jared Gordon in that fight. He was getting pressured, he was getting walked down by Jared Gordon for the majority of that fight. Imagine what Esteban Ribovics is gonna do to you, especially if this goes into the later rounds of the fight and you start to slow down and he's still pressuring forward. He could even use his grappling, and I don't even think he needs that in this fight. I'm picking Esteban Ribovics here. Confident picks list addition as well. I think his pressure, his power, his pace will just be too much for Nasrat in this fight. I can see him winning a decision or even getting a late rounds KO just due to wearing Nasrat down with his crazy pressure and his pace early. The only way I see Nasrat getting the win here is by catching Esteban early, and that's even unlikely because Nasrat isn't really known for his power, but he can put you out, don't get me wrong, but he's not known as a power puncher, and Ribovics is quite durable and was taking massive shots from Daniel Zellhuber in their fight too, so I just don't see it happening. Esteban Ribovics is the pick here. Late rounds KO or decision. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening. Cody Brundage versus Julian Marquez. What a co-main event here, guys. Am I right? I honestly don't even know how Julian Marquez is the favorite over Cody Brundage here. Especially looking how he's looked in his past few fights, coming off of back-to-back-to-back KO losses. But it is Cody Brundage, man. The guy's 10-6. He's actually pretty similar record to Julian Marquez and has a pretty similar way of winning and losing fights to Julian Marquez as well. And what I mean by that is that both of these fellas are the win hard, lose hard type of fighters, usually either finishing their opponent or getting finished themselves. I see this fight going the same way too. I might even put something on the fight to not go the distance, or potentially a bet on like under 1.5 rounds, depending on what I see the odds being. I think both guys are brawl heavy, both guys hit hard. Power advantage probably going to Julian Marquez, but I think Cody does pick his shots better in some exchanges, and he might even mix this fight up by trying to take Julian Marquez to the ground early. I think I favor Brundage going in as an underdog, mainly because I think he picks his shots better in wild exchanges, and he has the wrestling advantage going into this one. That's my main reason for picking him. And if this fight does somehow go to decision, I do favor Cody Brundage as well, since Julian Marquez does slow down significantly going into the later rounds of the fights. Cody Brundage is the pick here, but could go either way. Expect to finish in this one. Moving on to the main event of the card. Manel Kape versus Almabayev. Insanely fun fight here. I did put a poll up this week, and I did see that the picks for this fight are very close, with the slight edge being to the moderate underdog in Almabayev, which is very interesting, but I do understand it though. I've been the dude hyping up Almabayev on his way up in the UFC. I made a video ages ago highlighting fighters that I think were the best in their division besides the champion, and I believe Almabayev was in the top 3 for me, and I honestly do believe that still. The guy's on a 17 win streak. Going into this fight against Manel Kape, he is a predominant grappler and will be looking to get this fight to the ground, especially against a stand-up specialist like Manel Kape, who is extremely dangerous. But don't let the title of predominant grappler fool you, because Almabayev actually has some really solid striking. He implements a lot of kicks. He actually fights pretty solidly from range as a smaller fighter in general as well. And he's also quite strong and does pack a bit of power in his punches. Manel Kape is the stronger striker though, and the more powerful striker of the two, and will definitely be looking to keep this one on the feet. His only real losses inside the UFC have been to the grapplers in the division, so safe to say that it is extremely hard to beat Manel Kape on the feet alone. He's coming off a very impressive win over Bruno Silva, where he was able to showcase why he might be, in my opinion, the most dangerous and talented striker in the division. There are a few worries I have about picking Manel Kape in this fight though. The guy alters his fight style and fight stance drastically when he fights grapplers, and I think this is to try to prevent that takedown by keeping his hips back and being ready to sprawl, but it seems to affect his striking a lot, and enough to where Marquez had a lot of success in their fight and was able to hand Manel Kape a loss not too long ago. If you want to know what I'm talking about, and I need to confirm this myself, but I remember watching Manel Kape fight grapplers like Marquez, and I just remember feeling like he leans forward a bit more and he has his hips back, affecting his balance, just looking a little bit more awkward on the feet in general, and I just feel like it affects his fight style. Go check it out for yourself, could be wrong. But the other worry I had for Manel Kape as well, not just that one, was that he does slow down a little bit since he's an explosive guy, and someone like Almabayev has a great pace over 5 rounds and will only get better in the later rounds of the fight if there is no early finish. This is a really tough fight to pick since it's hard to know how these guys will deal with each other's styles until the actual fight takes place, but I will be siding with the moderate underdog in Almabayev to win this fight and to defeat Manel Kape, most likely by a decision win. I think the takedown attempts and the ground game will open up avenues for him in the striking. It'll cause Kape to kick less, be a bit more tentative, allow Asu to fight at his own pace, and to pressure him with his grappling. Very close fight, could see it going either way, but that's my pick for the main event, locking in Almabayev. That's it for my full card predictions and breakdown, guys, for the UFC Fight Night Kape versus Almabayev. If you guys have any thoughts or questions for me regarding the card, regarding maybe any bets or any of these picks, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to respond to every single comment left in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you guys next time.